Hi guys, over the last 10 years, crime in Britain has actually declined. Now there are some aspects of crime such as fraud and violent crime which have increased, but generally the trend is downward. Now that's not good for Nigel Farage and his narrative that Britain is lawless, it's out of control, and that the only party that can fix this is Reform UK. Now, there are two ways of dealing with crime. One is just to punish people, or the other is to look at the underlying root causes of crime, which is inequality and poverty. But which do you think Nigel is going to focus on?
So I want to be absolutely clear at the start of this 6-week campaign that Reform will be the toughest party on law and order and on crime that this country has ever seen. We will aim to cut crime by half in the first 5 years of a Reform government. We will take back control of our streets. We will take back control of our courts, of our prisons. And if you're a criminal, I am putting you on notice today that from 2029, or whenever that may be, either you obey the law or you will face very serious justice.
Okay, so that's an interesting figure. Half. Cut crime by half. Now, crime is actually going down, as I said. But cutting it in half is a pretty lofty goal. Now, if he doesn't succeed, is he going to take responsibility for that, or is he going to blame the blob, like the Tories did?
Now, in terms of policy proposals, I'm going to reiterate the point. Zero tolerance policing. Every single shoplifting offence, however small, should be prosecuted. Every single mobile phone that is stolen, if we can track it, we need to go to the addresses and find out who these people are.
Okay, there's a reason why shoplifting has been basically legalized, because the police don't have the resources, the money, the manpower to investigate these crimes. So they've lifted the bar and said, look, it's not worth our time and effort to investigate somebody who's stolen something worth 50 quid. This is the problem. The Tories, when they were in charge, imposed austerity. They cut the number of police officers, they closed a number of police stations, and fundamentally they did not deal with the underlying problems here of poverty and inequality. If they had dealt with that, then you wouldn't be seeing so much crime. But the response is not to look at the cause, it's just to look at the symptom. And let me be honest here, Farage is going to be successful because he will be able to present himself as somebody who's going to fix things that were broken by somebody else. And he will not be held to account until he gets into power. So he can promise the sun, moon and stars and say, I'm going to act tough on criminals, I'm going to punish them, I'm going to throw them in jail, because he hasn't been tested. And this is what the public like to hear. They're not interested in fixing the underlying core problems of crime. They're more interested in fixing the symptoms.
Stop and search. Stop and search in areas where knife crime is prevalent will go on up until saturation point, until we drive knives off the street. And believe me, this is a policy that I know from my campaigning recently around the country, supported by people right across the political spectrum. And if we have to build more knife arches at the entrance to train stations or bus stations or whatever it may be, then we will do it.
Now, I'm not an expert on knife crime, but from the information I've seen and some of the interviews I've seen with people who try to deal with the community, this problem in the community, they talk about community policing, a lack of community policing, a lack of support for the community. There's little interaction between the police and the community. And if there was a greater emphasis on community policing, this would help bring down knife crime. But once again, the approach is brute force. We're just going to punish people. This is not going to deal with the problem.
Fast track arrest. We believe that is very, very important. And if we have to open pop-up custody suites and centres around the country, we'll do so, because many police stations not just closing in huge numbers around the country, but many police stations, including a local one in Clacton, have lost their custody suites. So we believe that fast-track arrest, holding people, is right.
Now, this is true. The Conservatives, under their austerity programme, which Nigel Farage was against, although he supported something which is a bit like austerity, Brexit, but under austerity, the Tories closed police stations and they did not hire enough police officers. So many communities are without a police station or police officers on the beat. You know, simple things like having a police officer interact with the community can help prevent crime and give the community a sense of well-being, a sense of security. But those things were removed by the Conservatives.
And perhaps the biggest pledge that we would make today is to say 30,000 more police over a 5-year term of a parliament.
Okay, and how are you going to pay for that? Because we have to ask this question. How are you going to pay for that? Where are you going to find these police officers? Where are you going to how are you going to train them up? Because the Conservatives decided to cut because of austerity. But Nigel Farage is saying, I'm going to restore this. Now, he's mentioned he's not going to increase taxes. He's going to find savings, as he describes them. But cutting woke and getting rid of ergonomic chairs is not going to cut it.
And we will scrap all diversity, equality and inclusion roles,
which are actually necessary for understanding the problems that different communities face and understanding why certain people resort to crime. So once again, you're trying to get rid of measures to help you deal with the problem.
And we will aim for a higher and physically tougher standard of police officer on our streets.
What, like Robocop? That's the solution. Just have military, just have paramilitary on the streets. Are you going to bring down crime? Yes, but you're going to create a lot of problems on the other side of that.
I think that if criminals slightly fear the police, that is a desirable place for us to be as a society.
Wouldn't respect be better than fear? Shouldn't we respect the police as opposed to fear the police? Because the police are supposed to serve us as citizens. So wouldn't it be better that the police, we have respect for the police and the police have respect for citizens, as opposed to having this fear factor that ordinary citizens walking down the street are supposed to be afraid that they might be involved in some sort of crime? No, because this creates a type of abuse, an abuse of power. People should not be afraid of their government. They should not be afraid of their police. There should be mutual respect.
I knew a chap who'd served in the Grenadier Guards. He'd served in Afghanistan. He'd done 2 tours, one of them a very, very brutal tour. He came back in his late 20s, applied to join a county police force, but was rejected. Rejected. A fit, young guy, an army sergeant who'd done service, told to come back next year because they were having trouble with their quotas.
Does anyone actually believe this? Maybe this guy was rejected. Maybe this guy exists, but we don't know all the details. We just have to go on Nigel Farage's word.
Enough of all that rubbish. And in fact, on that theme, we would look very much to go to people who have served in the armed forces who we think would make ideal police officers.
Sorry, the army is completely different to the police force. Why would you go looking for people who are ex-military to work in the police force? They're completely different aspects of enforcement. Are there people who had skilled? Yes, but that shouldn't be your first port of call.
Fast-track courts. We have a massive backlog in all levels of court cases in this country, partly down to the repeated lockdowns that we went through, and partly down to the fact that actually, astonishingly, so many magistrates' courts have closed since 2010. Up to 50% of magistrates' courts closed since David Cameron came to power in 2010. So we would aim to reopen those magistrates' courts, and we would reach out to former and retired magistrates and say to them, please, we want you to come back to this job. Help us in this national effort to catch up with the backlog and to start dishing out proper justice. And of course, we know that 10% of criminals commit 50% of all crime in this country. So it won't surprise you to know that we are not supporters of the Labour government policy of early release for offenders. Weren't some of those scenes outside our prisons deplorable? People being let out, being met by Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, champagne being opened, and the reoffending rates have been truly horrific.
Why was the reoffending rate so horrific? Because there was no place for many of these people to go. One guy who was interviewed said he can't wait to commit a crime because he has nothing on the outside. He has no life on the outside. He has no job lined up. He has no support lined up. So he was literally saying, I'm going to commit a crime so I can get back into prison because at least I have some form of life there. That's part of the problem as well. Now, just punishing people is not going to fix it. You have to create something for them on the outside. If you don't, then you're going to see the reoffending rates increase.
Take a very, very different view, and we do absolutely think that if anyone commits more than 3, and whilst of course prison should aim initially to rehabilitate and to educate, if people are, convicted of more than 3 serious offences, well, frankly, we think that puts them on a course towards life imprisonment. And the same goes.
Wow. So convictions for what? For stealing chocolate from a supermarket, if you steal it 3 times, your life imprisonment? Okay.
The same goes for sexual offenders and violent offenders. We believe they should serve their full term, not just as punishment, but to keep the rest of society safe. So we're very strong on that. Commit the crime, pay the price, be you a shoplifter, be you someone carrying a knife, whatever it may be. And we would look to free up tens of thousands, up to 30,000 prison places. We will build Nightingale prisons. You remember the Nightingale hospitals? Within 72 hours, hospitals were built. And we'll work with private contractors, but we'll want to use the logistical skills that exist in the army and our armed forces to make this happen.
My goodness, he's going to use the army to build Nightingale prisons. Now, the problem with the Nightingale hospitals was that many of them were not used. Why? Because there wasn't the staff. The hospitals were built, they had the equipment, everything was ready to go, but they didn't have the doctors and nurses because of austerity and cuts to the NHS. So the prison service is under a massive amount of strain, and he wants to create more prisons. Well, where are you going to find the prison officers? Are you going to use the army once again? Is it the army is going to build them and the army is going to run them? Is the army allowed to sign up or disagree to this? This is insane. Now, it's potentially it's an okay idea if you're just moving low-risk criminals to these Nightingale prisons. There are, of course, massive issues with that, but if it's non-violent criminals, okay. But you need the staff and the resources. Where is that all going to come from?
We can build up to 12,000 prison places, and we can do so actually in short order. And there are 10,400 foreign prisoners in our prisons, has been mentioned on this platform already. They will be deported back to their home countries.
You can't deport people unless the country is willing to take them in. Why? Just think about it. The Conservatives were trying to out-Farage when it came to immigration. They could have easily, if it was easy, as Nigel Farage is trying to present it, they could have easily taken advantage of this situation and sent 10,000 foreign criminals back to their country. Why did they not do that? The Conservatives. They didn't because they couldn't. Because you need to have an agreement with those countries. Now, is Nigel Farage going to be able to have an agreement with those countries to take their criminals back? I don't know. The Conservatives haven't been able to achieve that. The Labour Party haven't been able to achieve that. What makes Nigel Farage think that he could? Oh, we'll stop visas or we'll stop the... No, it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. Remember, the Conservatives were much further to the right than normal on immigration, but they couldn't send anyone.
I think I'm in conversation...
Or they could send very few, I should say.
...with Eddie Rama from Albania, and I think he's rather agreed that he will take back all of the Albanian prisoners in this country, which is rather a good thing. And yes...
In some cases, you may need to pay. No mention of that. How are you going to pay for that?
We do think dynamic prison places overseas work. You've seen America doing it recently, but the Scandinavian countries are doing it too. You know, Estonia is quite prepared to take prisoners from this country. And in fact, the Labour government has had those conversations already, but of course, nothing has come to fruition. Denmark sends off prisoners to Kosovo and places like that. I mean, it is quite astonishing that to keep a prisoner in a British prison costs nearly £52,000 a year. You could send a child to Eton for that price. So if we can send some of our worst violent criminals overseas to serve their terms, then yes. And if that means that Ian Huntley goes to El Salvador, well, our attitude is so be it.
Okay, I'll have to stop here because it goes on for some time. But so he wants to send people to El Salvador like Donald Trump. He thinks it'll be cheaper to send people overseas. There are a whole range of issues with that, human rights issues. What about people who later turn out to be innocent? They could sue the UK government for millions, perhaps billions of pounds because of wrong and inhumane treatment. When it comes to Donald Trump, people are being denied due process. Would Nigel Farage deny people due process and send them to El Salvador as well? Is it just people who are in prison today? There's so many questions about this. How would human rights protections be upheld if you're sending people to another country? There are a huge number of problems with this, but I don't think we're going to get any answers from Nigel Farage. So this is about This is about appearing tough, not dealing with the underlying causes of crime, because they're not sexy. They're not interesting. People just want to see somebody like Farage swinging a baseball bat around. That's what they like to see. It's not going to fix the problem. It will fix some of the symptoms, but the underlying problem will remain. And unfortunately, I'm in the minority here. I understand that people want to see a politician tough on crime. They think it would actually work. But the only way it could work is where you end up surrendering your human rights, where you trade your own human rights for security. And all Farage has to say is, well, it's necessary in order to deal with crime. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.